I'd like to introduce to you Alice Kenny from Butterfly Conservation, and we're really excited that Alice is joining us today because she's going to be telling us about wildflower meadows and answering any of your questions. And please do put any questions that you have in the chat. Um, Alice might be able to see them, and if not, I can collate them and ask them to her. And if there's loads of questions, don't worry, we may have a little bit of time for us to put them to Alice, and if she has time, she may be able to answer them and get back to us, and we can share them with you. But just a big thank you to Alice for joining us today, and to our friends at Butterfly Conservation for making this workshop happen. So this is our live lesson on autumn meadow sowing, and I'm going to stop now. I'm going to hand over to Alice, who's going to take us through everything else. Thanks, Alice.
Hi everyone. I'll just share my screen. That's okay, and then hopefully it pops up all right again.
Yeah, we can see it. Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, like Josh says, my name's Alice. I work with Butterfly Conservation, and I have a really exciting role because I get to go out to lots of different spaces like schools and community groups, and I get to tell them all about our Wild Spaces project. And sometimes that can mean going out and chasing butterflies and seeing if we can catch them. Lots of times it means me tripping over and everyone laughing at me as I try to catch butterflies. It can mean me giving some advice and tips and hints for schools or community groups or people for what they can do in their own spaces. So if you don't know who we are, we're a charity, which means we get funding from lots of different places. But we have volunteers and we have a board of people that just make sure what we're doing is for the best interest of butterflies and moths as well as people. So we're all about taking practical action and doing what we can do to support our native and local butterflies and moths. Um, so I'm just going to give you a bit of a scary looking graph, but don't worry too much about it. This is really just to show you what our butterflies and moths are up to at the moment. And what we would really like is to see the very end where it says 1976 and it has really, really dark green strands. That's what we want because that shows lots and lots and lots of species are flying about. It means they're able to jump from one space to the next space, or fly, sorry, from one space to the next space. It means they've got lots of food to eat when they're caterpillars, as well as lots of nectar to drink when they're adults. But our problem is, more recently, we're over in this kind of grey or yellowy strand, which means that our butterflies aren't doing quite as well. They're kind of struggling because they've lost lots of their habitat, so their spaces that they can live as an adult or as a chrysalis or even as a caterpillar. They don't have many things to nectar on. They don't have many spaces to hide. If they winter over as an adult or if they winter as a caterpillar, all these spaces are being lost, which is a big problem for them. If they don't have their habitat, we're kind of struggling with their numbers. So we want these lovely dark green stripes where you can see lots and lots of little pictures of butterflies and moths. But really, we're on that other end, but there's not quite as many butterflies and moths. They're not getting to move around quite as easily anymore. That's scary, but we want to give you some hints and tips around what you can do to make spaces a bit better for your local butterflies and moths. So I know why I care about butterflies and moths. I love them. But why do we want you to care about them? Well, do you know what? They look pretty. They're lovely. They've been here for much longer than we have, and they're lovely to see flying about. They make us feel better when we do see them. They make us feel a bit happy, and they give us time to kind of just chill out and watch a space. But they're also very important for our ecosystem. So lots and lots of different animals have times maybe when they're going to have their young around when our caterpillars might be around. But then if this is knocked out of sync, then it can be a real problem for other animals in our ecosystem. Um, they're also really good for indicators for climate change. Butterflies and moths are, I'm going to start throwing the sciencey words now, are ectothermic, which means they respond to the external temperatures. If we have a really, really warm winter, it can knock them out a little bit because they're not really used to that, because Scotland is and should be quite cold during the winter. Or if we can have a really, really cold summer, cold, wet summer, like we've kind of had this year, again, it can knock them out and just not have our numbers the right level, just not have as many species as we should have. They're really, really quick to respond because they respond to that external temperature change. So we can kind of tell what's happening with climate change by watching our butterflies and moths fly around, like when they have their young, or when they're turning into their chrysalis, or when they're flying about as an adult. Some species are quite sneaky and they're pretty good at having two generations in 1 year. So our common blues, you'll see them at two different times of the year if we get a nice late warm summer. But then sometimes if we don't have that warmer summer, we might not see them as easy. So why do you think our butterflies and moths aren't doing so well? If you've got any ideas, I'd like to see if you put them in the chat. Just let me know, why do you think they're not doing so well at the moment? I'll give you a minute to think about it.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Have a chat amongst yourselves, then you can let your teachers know and they can type in the chat. Why don't we think our butterflies and moths are doing so well at the moment?
And if you don't know, that's okay as well.
I can hear lots of thinking and conversations happening all over Scotland, Alice.
Yeah, some top answers coming in. So yeah, temperature is the big one. If it's cold or if it's too warm as well, they're kind of struggling. They're so quick to react to that climate change, and that can be a big problem. Even a couple of degrees makes a big difference for them because it's not what they've adapted to. They spent long, long times adapting to what we should naturally have in Scotland. Pesticides and chemicals, absolutely, they're a big one. So the pesticides that we might use for killing off insects that protect our food are also going to kill off the insects that we kind of want to see, like our butterflies and moths. And the other big one, there's two other big ones that we've got, and that is fragmentation, which means our habitats are getting smaller and they're getting kind of further and further apart. And yeah, absolutely, destroying their habitats. Their habitat loss is a big one. If they don't have their space to live, we're going to lose them. So we'll try and make those little habitats in your school grounds with a few hints and tips, hopefully. And I've got some plant words for you, just to hopefully make it a little bit easier as we're chatting. Because sometimes I forget, because I talk about butterflies and moths and habitats all the time. Sometimes I forget, and I just keep using the words over and over again, but they're good words to know. So we're going to talk about annual plants, and those are plants that are going to come up once, and they're going to drop their seed, and then the next year you'll find them in new spots as their seeds have dropped. And they have lots of different ways that they'll drop these seeds. Maybe like poppies look like they've got a little pepper shaker on top. Things like dandelions will maybe float in the wind. We're going to talk about perennial plants, and those are plants that come back year after year after year after year as long as their habitat's nice and looked after. We're not going to talk too much about biannual plants, but those are plants that you'll sometimes not see them flower the first year they're there, but you'll maybe see them the second year, and then after that they'll drop their seeds and then they'll start to move around. So foxgloves are a good one that do this. We're going to talk about native plants, and that's plants that we would naturally find in Scotland, things that have adapted to live in Scotland that we're okay, we're happy to see them in lots and lots of places. Sometimes thought of as weeds, but weeds are just native plants that have done really, really well. They can self-seed, they can look after themselves, and as long as their kind of wider habitat is good and they're happy, they'll grow. And a couple of true or falses for you. So to make a meadow, because that's what we want to know, you just chuck some seeds on the ground and they grow.
So is that true or false? Have a quick chat amongst your class and let your teachers know so they can put their answers in the chat. Is that statement true or false?
Yeah, false. So they need a bit more work than that. We need to plan a little bit and we need to make the space for them. So we'll talk a bit more about that. But don't worry, because I'm going to throw lots and lots of information at you. Don't worry if you don't remember it all. We'll give you out some more information later for the teachers just to have a quick look at and remind themselves of what we talk about. But yeah, false. You don't just chuck them down and hope for the best. They need a bit more work. So true or false, you need no maintenance. You just cut the grass and leave it and they'll come back every year. Do you think true or false?
We've got a mixture for this one, it looks
Got a
like.
mix? Yeah. So false. We actually need to do a little bit of work. Um, if you think way, way back to when plants were first kind of growing on the planet, the most complicated space you could get would be a woodland. And it starts by growing our little weeds that don't take much nutrients, and then when they fall and drop, they would naturally put nutrients back into the soil. And then we get slightly more complicated plants that need a bit more nutrients, and then they would grow and fall and drop, and it would go on and on like this. If we don't maintain it, what will end up happening is we'll get docks, we'll get nettles, then we'll start to get our pioneer trees, like our birch coming in, and we'll get scrubland. So we actually need to do a little bit of maintenance to make sure that we keep them as meadow species. Otherwise, that habitat will naturally change. Meadows are messy. Maybe they don't look pretty. Yeah, a bit of a mix of true and false. I kind of say this one's a bit of a mixed one as well. Yeah, they can look a bit messy, but do you know what? That kind of works for us. We want them to be a bit messy. We'll chat about why messy is actually quite good. Um, but yeah, it's one of those things. We kind of just want it to look a bit more wild and a bit more natural. So true. You can make a meadow at any time of year. Yeah, so we're going for false for this one. Depends on what you want to do. So if you are using seeds, then that's false. We need to make it kind of now. We sow them in autumn because they need lots of cold to germinate some of the seeds. So some of those seeds need that really cold spell, that wet weather to get into the ground, to start that germination, to start their roots and shoots growing. However, if you have lots and lots and lots of money and you can buy plug plants, then you kind of can make it whenever you want to. But we don't all have lots of money, so we're going to use seeds, which is a bit more cost friendly, and that needs to happen kind of now. So we're going to talk about our meadows as being wild spaces because obviously I work with butterfly conservation. I want to have a meadow space that works for butterflies and moths. And we talk about wild spaces, and that's what we're hoping you're going to create with your own school grounds. And we talk about these being species that can feed adult butterflies and moths so they can get their nectar. They're species that caterpillars, we call them breed species, so places that caterpillars can eat, because caterpillars are actually really fussy. They don't like to eat lots and lots of different things. Each one kind of likes it, or each species likes its own little food plant. And um, that helps them know that they've got access to food when their caterpillars are going to be around. And we're going to talk about shelter species, and that's species that species that are going to be there all year. So shelter species might help chrysalis. They might be species that adult butterflies that overwinter or hibernate gives them space that they can shelter during the winter. Or it might be species that, you know what, in this bad weather when it's really wet and rainy, that a caterpillar or an adult can go and hide and just let the bad weather pass. So when we make our wild spaces, we kind of want to be thinking about these three things, these feed, breed, and shelter. A wild space doesn't have to have all three, but if it can have three, then that's brilliant because then we can get a full life cycle. We can get space for our caterpillars, space for our chrysalis, and space for our adult species. So there's lots of different options for meadows. And you kind of have to decide what one's going to be right for you. Because I don't know what your school grounds are like. I don't know how much time you have to spend on them. So you need to do a little bit of planning and a little bit deciding on what you're going to have in your meadow. So one of the options could be an annual meadow, and you quite often see these in kind of big cities and things like that because they're very, very bright, they're very colourful. We can actually sow these um, early and kind of March, autumn time, depending on the weather, as long as it's not too wet. We can start to sow these around then, and we can leave them over the summer. We get lots and lots of colour very quickly. It's not too expensive to buy annual seeds, so that's one of the pros from them. And we don't have lots of grass in that space, so we can. It's not going to look too messy in the winter when all those plants die off and they die down. Then we're not going to be left with lots of grass left over. But this does have some cons attached to it as well. You need to do this every year. You can't just sow this once and then it will come up every single year after that. You actually need to go back in and rake and re-sow it every year. It's great for lots of pollinators. It's great for bees, it's great for hoverflies, but it's not the best for butterflies to actually complete their life cycle because lots of species need that grass to feed on. Lots of species need that grass to have that shelter space, that nice tussocky grass, those long grasses that you'll get. Lots of our moths might hide in there during the day. And quite often when I've gone out to do some surveys, I've disturbed those moths in the long grass when I've maybe been walking through the grass. So I know they're there during the day, just hiding. But this kind of meadow is probably not going to be the best for them because it's not very dense. There's lots of gaps at the bottom. This kind of meadow doesn't offer space for chrysalis. So again, we'll get those chrysalis sometimes attached to grasses, actually on the stem of grass. You'll maybe see them over the winter or during the summer for a couple of weeks. Sometimes you'll get the chrysalis under the ground or kind of just sitting at that long grass again. So if we then don't have that long grass there available, it's another one we're going to kind of miss out on. But it does look, it's very colourful, it's very bright. So if you think an annual meadow is going to be great for us, this is what we want, then what do you need to do with it? Well, you need to prepare the ground. You need to remove the soil, and you remove the grass, sorry, and turn the soil. If the seeds can't get into the soil, then they're not going to grow. The grass will be too compact, there'll be too many roots, and they won't be able to get in there and germinate. So yeah, you can sow these around April, but you'll need to do it every year, remember. It's not going to come back and look the same every single year. They might come back, but it won't look quite as full. You'll start to lose the numbers a little bit. So you need to go in and kind of intervene and rake up the soil. Another option you can go for would be like a grassy meadow. And this is the one that normally people think is a bit messy. But yeah, that's great. I like the mess. So you're going to have those perennial plants. Those plants that are going to come back every year. You'll see bits of them kind of left over in the ground even after you cut the grass. This is going to be a good space for that feed, breed, and shelter space. So our caterpillars will love this space. Our adults can come in and feed at different times of year. A nice, good native grass mix is going to have different flowers that flower different times of the summer. Probably from about April right up to about now. You're going to have those lovely flowers coming in there, all coming up at different times, giving different colours. And that is great for our butterflies and moths because different species will come out at different times and they can feed on those different plants. It's going to have a lovely space for our chrysalis to sit, if that's on the long grasses, either actually on the stem or in the ground. It's going to have that nice shelter space so that they can survive kind of cold, wet weather, they can hide, or those moths that fly at night time, they can rest during the day. Other animals are going to come in and visit because you've got all these lovely pollinators coming in. You're going to get your other hoverflies and your bees and all those other things. You're going to get some lovely ladybirds in there, some grasshoppers, a lovely good mix of insects coming in. And because you've got all these lovely insects coming in, you're going to start to get some birds coming in. You might hopefully get some hedgehogs coming in to visit you. So you're kind of adding to that lovely ecosystem with that good, healthy habitat. Cons for this one, your first year you sow it, it's not going to look very pretty. It's going to look a little bit messy. The plants aren't going to be particularly tall yet. So the you'll it'll probably look a bit like kind of dull weeds. Grasses will start to come up quite early, but the first year might just look kind of grassy more than colourful. You are going to need to maintain it as well. So every year, all that grass is going to need to get cut, and then it's going to need to get raked off. 'Cause remember we said about it going to those natural and reverting to those natural spaces like scrubs and scrubland with the trees and things. If we don't take away all that grass on top, then the grass will start to break down, it'll go back into the soil, and you'll start to get trees coming in. And that's not the best because then you're going to lose your lovely meadow space. My top tip for this one, if you are creating a lovely grassy meadow, then it's a good idea to leave patches of long grass uncut. So don't cut all of it, but leave just sections of it with long grass. And that way you can get your chrysalis or your caterpillars that maybe overwinter or your adults and they can hide in those long grass spaces. So things like our ringlet and meadow brown butterflies, those kind of brown butterflies we often see flying around a meadow, they'll normally be a caterpillar during the winter and they'll normally sit at the base of those long grasses or maybe just kind of sit under just at the base of the ground. So if we can have just patches where we just leave it, then that's great for those wild space elements. Other top tips for your grassy meadows. We're going to start to look at some of them now. We want to start preparing the ground now and getting the seeds in. So we want to get all the grass roots dug up. We want to turn over the soil a little bit, and then we want to get our seeds sown. The other thing you can do, because that can be quite expensive if you don't have lots and lots of money to have big bags of wildflower seed, the other option is just leaving some of the grass uncut. So don't cut it and see what's there because quite often we'll have those plants living in the soil already and they just need a chance to grow. So what you can do is you can just leave the section without cutting it and just have a little bit of a survey and see what's going on, see if you've got some yarrows and some clovers and things are already sitting in there. And then if you know what you've got, you can scratch the ground, scarify it, you can get some seeds in, and this is great. If anyone's got football boots, you can put the seeds in with your football boots and stand on it. And you're not going to cause lots of damage to the plants that are there if you do it around now, but you're just going to add to what is already there. Less expensive way to do it, and good if you've got any kind of native things coming up. When you buy the seed mix as well, they'll also give you a sow rate, which tells you how much to weigh for the size of the space. So we're going to have to do a little bit of maths when we're doing when we're making our meadows. But it's a good thing to just copy that and just kind of see how much we actually need because different seed mixes will have different sow rates. Other top tips, test soil, see what your pH is like, because that might tell you actually what kind of seeds you might need to put into the soil. There's lots of different options and there's lots of different companies you can buy them from. But one of the companies that we use is Scotia Seeds. They're a really good one because they're local seeds, they're native seeds, and they'll give you different ideas and different seed packets, lots and lots of options. But they can give you, if you've got very acidic soil, they can give you plants that might work for that acidic soil type. And that buying native seeds one is a really important one. So we need to get native seeds that are Scottish seeds. So sometimes if we buy from garden centres, they're not always native seeds, or they might be not local provenance seeds. So they might be ones that would naturally be found in Scotland, but they've actually been picked in other countries. But what we really want are the ones that are from Scotland, because then we know that they'll cope with our weather. And if you have meadows in your local area, one of the really great things you can do is actually go and ask whoever manages the meadow if you can collect some seeds from them, because then you know you've got those local provenance seeds, so they've come from your local area. They're quite happy growing in your local climate, and it can help us save a little bit of money as well. So another option, just to use up all your space, if you've got lots of big trees, you can actually plant some kind of meadowy spaces underneath the trees that you've got. And this can be a great one for those really early plants that come out. And that can give nectar for our early pollinators that come out as well. So any of those, maybe those bees that come out early, as well as the moths and butterflies that come out early. So things like our red admiral butterflies and our peacock butterflies, they'll actually hibernate over the winter as an adult. And when they emerge around February time, they're looking for lots of nectar to give them some energy before they start breeding. And these understory plants can be a great one because they're used to low light levels, so they'll often come out quite early. So they're a good one to pop into spaces, and then you'll get different grasses as well popping up in there. So you can have some long grass under your trees, as well as maybe like some primroses or some bugle, and then that'll give you some early nectar. So you'd love to have a meadow, but you don't have any space, but you still want to do something to support butterflies and moths, not a problem. You can still do something. So lots of our species will actually like herbs. So we've got a large white butterfly here on some oregano. In the background, we've also got some chives that are left flower and some mint and marjoram and things like that. They can be great. If you've got a tiny little spot, a little box, a window box with some herbs in there is great. We had some peacock butterflies in our garden recently who were feeding on some mint. So a great one to have if you don't have lots and lots of space, but you've got pots and raised ground that you can have some things on. You might want to have some garden plants. Again, if you've got some pots and planters that you want to plant up, you can plant these up with some nectar friendly plants. So here we've got a peacock butterfly on some phlox, and we've got a small tortoiseshell on some lavender. So you can have those kind of options as well, just having just little garden pots, but gives you lots of options. We've got some verbena in here, which flowers kind of late in the summer, and then lovely peacock butterfly on there, which is nice and velvety looking. So I think this one had just emerged. This was in our garden about 3 weeks ago. And it'll be getting ready to spend its winter, probably under our garden shed, because they quite like living under there in the winter. So we find them feeding as much as they can in all the gardens around about us. The other thing you can do, if you don't have that meadow space, you can put some native flowers into some pots and planters. This is one of my favourite ones. So we've got bird's foot trefoil here, sometimes called eggs and bacon. So it gets called bird's foot trefoil because when round about now the seed pods will be out and it looks like it's got bird's feet with 3 little pods coming out. But early in the summer it gets called eggs and bacon because it looks like fried eggs and bacon with little yellow and purple and kind of reddy spots on it. This is a great one as a caterpillar food plant, so those breed plants. We've got common blue caterpillar on here that kind of looks like its food plant. So the caterpillars were quite good at hiding amongst their food plants. This is a great one for that, and six-spot barnet moth as well. So there's one of those day-flying moths, they quite like this. We could have some clover. It's a really good one because it's got those different flower heads that open up at different times, which gives you lots of nectar. So even if one little flower, because that purple flower is not one flower head, but it's lots and lots of flower heads. So it'll release its nectar at different times, giving a nice long flowering period. Another one that works really great in a pot, but you'll find it in your meadow mix as well. But just a nice plant to have, and it'll go quite big as well. A great weed we could have in our space if we let it is nettles. So another one, you can actually have nettles in a pot if you want to. And it's just one of those things. Yeah, they're a bit jaggy, but do you know what? They're great for insects. So lots and lots of species will use these as their caterpillar food plant, like peacocks or red admirals or commas. This is what they'll feed on as a caterpillar. So you can kind of see they've got that kind of hairyish body that makes them look a little bit silvery, kind of like the nettles. And it doesn't bother them, it doesn't harm them. The jagginess actually kind of helps them No one's coming near a stinging nettle because they don't want to get stung, so it lets them be left alone. Our scabious is another great weed and another one like that clover that flowers at different times. So we've got a common butterfly here feeding on the scabious. Um, and again, it's another one that kind of it releases that nectar at different times. It looks great in a pot, but it also looks great in a meadow space. So if you just got those couple of pots, this is a good nectar plant, as well as a caterpillar plant. We could have some knapweed. We've got a bit of a theme with the colours here. We've got a bit of a theme with the different flowers' heads on one kind of flower, so that they keep coming back and back and back, and getting fed up with them. Now, last few final tips. So this is a really important one. If you're going to make a lovely, lovely meadow, make sure that you get your planning permission. So you don't want to make your meadow and then for it to get cut down and then you not to see the benefits of it. So my tip would be get permission from your local grounds maintenance team. If you're in a council managed school, there'll be a team leader nearby who just need to get in touch with them and just let them know. But make sure you do that before you start planning your space. We'll One of the great things you can do is give them a little map or invite them to see your school grounds because they'll want to see them, and they'll be very, very happy that you're actually doing something because councils have lots and lots of plans that they need to work towards for pollinators. So it'll be great for them to see you doing something really positive, but you just need to let them know. And you can take a screenshot of Google Maps and just put a little drawing on it of where you want your meadow to go, and you can share that with them. You can invite them over, show them the space, and let them know what you're thinking. And you can also, which would be a great tip, is put up some signs so people can see where the meadow is. So once you've created it and you've got the permission and you've let the council know, just put a sign up so that they can see why and where you've done the space. So plan activities all around the year, all year round. So just because it's winter doesn't mean we can't go out and use our meadow space. It's actually one of the best times to go out and make our meadow space and see what's happening. In the spring, we can go out and observe it. We don't want to be running around on it too much or kind of putting too much pressure onto it, but we want to see what it's up to. And if you're a bit worried that maybe your meadows, seeds and stuff haven't really worked in the autumn, you can put an extra little sprinkling down around about March and April time. You can just give them an extra sprinkling just to make sure. And again, get the football boots on, get in and squish the seeds in, do your meadow dance, stomp it all down. If you just want to make sure you've got lots and lots of seeds in there. But that's not always the most productive time of year, but you can still do it round about then. Ask for the meadow to be cut. So whoever manages your site, if you're in a council managed space, you can let them know when you would like it to be cut and make sure that all the grass that you do get cut off is pulled and raked off of it. You can actually share that. So if you've got another space and you want to extend your meadows, what you can do is take that green hay, we call it, so all the stuff that you've cut, you can scoop it all up, you can take it to your next meadow site that you've prepared by removing this grass and rotating oil, and you can set that on there and you can give it a sugar with some rakes, and then all this little seeds that have been stuck in that grass mix that you've cut will then drop into the new space and then you can rake that off. So that's another method of creating a meadow that you can actually use. But once you've got a really nice strong meadow created, you can then think about that and sharing it with other schools or other community spaces if anyone else is around and they want to make a meadow. My other top tip would be to make some signs to let people know why the space looks different now. So in the summer, we might want to discourage people coming and using it. In the winter, we might want to leave those sections with that long grass and maybe just pop up some notes to say why you've left it, and let people know about those meadow browns and those ringlets and all those overwintering adults that might be found in that long grass. And the other thing that I've not put a note in here, but the other thing would be great to do is record what you see on your space, and just to know who's coming to visit it, because it's over time and over years, hopefully you get more and more species coming in to use your space. So record if you get moths, if you get butterflies, if you get bees and hoverflies and ladybirds and grasshoppers and birds. Start to record what you're seeing so you can have an idea over time of what's happening and the changes being made to your space. Sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming and you forget all the hints and tips, because I've hopefully given a few ideas of plants in here, but there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds more. So we have a website that has all the plants that we can think of, and we keep adding more and more to it. So you can register your space with us. But you can see other hints and tips, but it's also quite a good way of seeing the changes of your space, because you can add pictures of your new meadows and you can take pictures at different times of year, and over different years as well, to see how it's changed. So that's my kind of final tip for you, for our spaces. So that was a
Thank you
very
so
quick run
much.
through. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much, Alice. I just want to say, if anyone has any questions that you would like Alice to answer, then please type them in the chat. We've got a few minutes before I will share our final slides. So I'll just give people a few minutes to type some questions if they've got them. I have a question in the meantime, Alice. You gave us there are different examples of meadows that you shared with us of what students could do. Is there any way that they could combine them in the same space, or is it best for them to do separate ones in separate spaces?
You can combine them, you can make as many different connected spaces as you want, really. The best thing to do is just kind of look at things like the sunlight, so different levels of sunlight, and just picking the right plants for those spaces. But yeah, they can all be connected together as long as the right conditions are there for the plants. You can absolutely join them all up together. So
Mm,
just checking you've got the right kind of pH, that you've got a kind of relatively neutral pH for those kind of like grassy meadows, or if you've got that acidic pH, then you might want to kind of merge the two. So you might have an acidic space and a kind of neutral space together. Your meadow might kind of link into an under kind of woodland story, which we've definitely done. So yeah, you can
yeah,
do. Just check the conditions for the
yeah.
specific plants, if that helps. If that makes
No,
sense.
that's very helpful. Thank you. We've just had a question come in from a class who said we have an area outside our classroom window that is grassed with trees. Can we sow seeds there, or maybe use containers?
Yeah, so again, checking the light levels. So depending on how big the trees are, if they've got like quite a big tree canopy and there's not lots of sunlight coming through, they might struggle. So most meadows, kind of meadow plants will need a really high level of sunlight. So you might need to opt for those kind of more shadier loving plants, but you can still have a kind of woodland edge meadow mix. Um, so you could absolutely do that, or you could have the containers, and yeah, either option I think would work. And it might be a case of a bit of trial and error and see what works. But just checking what that light level is like. The roots shouldn't be too much of a problem. Just be careful when you are sowing them and raking them that you're not causing any damage to those tree roots. That you're not kind of scratching them and kind of inviting infection.
Thank you very much for that answer. And just a reminder that if you do have a question, you can still put it in the chat, and we can get any questions that Alice hasn't been able to answer today to her. And if she has time, then she may be able to answer them for you and let us know. I thought one of the things that I found really interesting was that we can put these plants in containers. So we don't necessarily need to have a large field near us for us to still have these things. So if we're kind of limited for space, then we can still help support all of these wonderful moths and butterflies by planting plants in containers. So thank you so much for that presentation, Alice. It was really, really informative and interesting. Just some very final things from us. So all of the actions that Alice was talking about, you can include that in your Eco Schools action plan. So some of you joining us will be Eco Schools, and you can use our action plan template, like we're showing you here, to help you create your wildflower meadow. And it's perfect if you're working on the biodiversity or the school grounds topics. And you can also use our action plan if you're an eco school or if you're not an eco school, okay? And you can find the copy of this action plan and the resources from Butterfly Conservation to help get you started in the link that my colleague Nicola has just shared. Just before I go to our final slide, Alice, there's just been another quick question. We've only got a few minutes left, but one class has said, what happens if all the butterflies die out? I don't know if you're able to answer that in about a minute. Sorry to be tight on time there.
Yeah, so it's a big question because lots and lots will happen if butterflies die out. So we have them as our pollinators. So for all our fruits and veggies that we like, we need those pollinators in there. We mentioned that they're really important as kind of part of wider ecosystems. So lots of birds will time when they have their babies to when the caterpillars will be out. But if the caterpillars aren't there, then those birds might not survive if they don't have enough food. And then that can then cause a chain reaction with the rest of the food chain. So the animals that might eat those birds don't have enough food and so on and so on. Um, or other little plants might not get pollinated either. So lots and lots of things.
Yeah, so they're absolutely integral to loads of different living things, which is why it's really important that we try and support them as much as we can. Thanks for that, Alice. So if you do any of this work, just like with all of the work that we share with you, it'd be lovely for you to share your wild spaces with us on social media. And we value your feedback on all of our live lessons. So if you do have a moment, then please share, please complete this feedback form that my colleague Nicola has just shared in the chat. There's space for you and your pupils to say what you liked and what you would like to see more of. Just the penultimate thing to share from me. We're really lucky that we get loads of brilliant people like Alice to come and work with us in our different live lessons. We've got one on the 6th of November about dealing with disinformation. We then have one on the 15th of January in partnership with the RSPB, the Big School Birdwatch. We then have our Spring Clean Week in March, and we've got our Natural Scotland Week in May. But that's all from me. Just a big thank you again to Alice for all of the amazing work that she shared with us and all of the brilliant ideas that she's given us. A thank you to teachers for joining us and supporting your pupils. And thank you to all of the pupils who've joined us today and all of the brilliant questions you've asked. Have a lovely rest of your day, and we will see you all at our next live lesson. Thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye.